Hello and welcome to episode 263 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I'm joined here today by two people whom I haven't spoken to in a while. First, Tina Olah.
Hi.
And second, Rob Fenner.
Hey, thanks for having me back, and thank you to all of our backers for helping us meet this the stretch goal for this surprise appearance.
I wish we had backers. I wish we had funds. So, but we have neither crowds nor funds here at Retro Encounter. But regardless, we're going to have an episode all about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, listeners, you probably know this already, so I apologize for being pedantic for 40 seconds. Crowdfunding is a catch-all term for a voluntary community-funded project. And the most popular online crowdfunding platform is probably Kickstarter. Kickstarter launched in 2009 and basically is a creative outlet where people can post either ideas or early versions of products or projects, then ask for the public to back them by pledging money, and then rewarding backers with a promise of some type of product delivery or similar by specific dates. It's vague and doesn't always work, which makes it a bit fascinating to talk about, which is why we decided years ago to kick around the idea for a podcast about it. And Rob, you were one of the people in, I don't know, 2016 or 2017, where we talked about doing this episode, which is why I specifically asked you to if you wanted to join us again for this. And Tina, you've been writing a series of articles for Retro Encounter for right around 2 years called Crowdfunding Chronicles, where you highlight crowdfunding highlight crowdfunding projects specific to RPGs and our audience. So I guess starting with you, Tina, what are your very generalized thoughts on crowdfunding, and how have you enjoyed researching and writing those Crowdfunding Chronicles articles?
Well, originally I started the article because I noticed there was a lot of little games I was seeing on, especially Kickstarter, that didn't get a lot of press attention. So I just wanted to bring more attention to them, like especially a lot of little pixel RPGs that don't get on some of the major sites, right? And like overall, I really like Kickstarter. There's also some really good projects on Fig, IndieGogo. A few of them just aren't put together that well. Like if there's no screenshots or anything like that, then I just won't cover something like that. But I think overall the platforms have been great for like bringing in some more unique little games.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of the big alternatives to Kickstarter. Fig, spelled F-Y-G-G, is a more investor-focused one.
I think it's just F-I-G.
Oh, it's just F-I-G?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the figs from Dragon Quest IX. Wow, okay, I'm really a mess today. I apologize. You mentioned a couple other Kickstarter alternatives. GoFundMe is another crowdfunding one that's very, very popular among individuals. But for GoFundMe, you'll find everything from art projects to people asking for funds for medical assistance. So crowdfunding is definitely not just limited to video games, although we'll mostly be talking about video games in this episode. I doing some research before this episode, I found a number that there are over 2,000 crowdfunding sites in an article in 2018. So there's definitely a lot out there. One interesting one, Square Enix Collective, was a crowdfunding project that Square Enix ran for about 4 or 5 years. They sort of folded in 2018. But
yeah, I really like that site too. Did it just like disappear?
Sort of.
I didn't realize that it folded. I liked a lot of what they put out, like Tokyo Dark, and I haven't played Forgotten Anne yet, but that's on my list of something I really want to check out.
Moonlighter is a game that they put out, I think, in 2017 or 2018 that I know Greg played and talked about during some episodes of Random Encounter. That's a small studio in Spain. But Square Enix Collective, I think it still exists, but it's not really a crowdfunding platform anymore. It's like a specific UK-based studio within Square Enix that focuses on small projects, but it's not really a public crowdfunding site anymore. And Tina mentioned that a lot of crowdfunding projects were not getting a lot of mainstream coverage, and for better or for worse, RPG Fan was part of the problem. We specifically didn't cover Kickstarter projects for a couple of years and even though we got a lot of emails from indie developers asking us to cover their projects. And the reasoning being, we don't know how real this is. We don't know how trustworthy these developers are. We are suspicious that if any of these might ever come to light, unless it was an enormous Kickstarter project at the level of a Bloodstained or an Eiyuden Chronicles. So Tina, you pitched it to Mike Salvato and the others to have just a dedicated article to Kickstarter RPG projects or crowdfunded RPG projects. That seemed like the right solution, to have it to have it not be front page news, but some level of dedicated coverage. So now we are covering indie crowdfunding campaigns the past 2 years in a way that we didn't for quite some time. So Rob, give me your general thoughts on crowdfunding projects and how you think it's affected how we play RPGs or how RPGs are made.
Okay. Ideally, Kickstarter is meant to be disruptive, right? As you said, it's meant to be a means to provide smaller indie developers with financial backing to get their works out there when they wouldn't be able to otherwise, and then to perhaps avoid a pesky deal with the devil with a publisher or a venture capital firm or something like that. But I'm kind of critical of Kickstarter as a whole. I think that if we look at the top 10 most successful Kickstarters, we see a lot of familiar names. One that I think is kind of exemplary of some of the problems with Kickstarter is Shenmue 3. And that's not to say that Shenmue's bad or that it doesn't have its fans. But one thing that I noticed when I was when I first got wrapped up in the Kickstarter craze, and I was contributing to projects that were heralded as a return to a dead series, or the new project from an auteur who hadn't gotten something out there in a while. Mm-hmm. I found that you can't really go back, can you? And you like the idea of a return to one of your favorite franchises, but in practice, it might be you like the idea of how you felt in those days rather than seeing something like that continue. And I'm using Shenmue as an example for a few reasons. First of all, Shenmue is so time and place and was incredibly divisive at the time of its release. Ultimately being a financial failure, but it's indisputable that it was a technologically groundbreaking game that dared to do something very different that had ever been seen on console before. Their initial goal was 2 million. Of course, you're probably not going to get 70 million from a Kickstarter. As we can see, looking at some of the games we're going to talk about later, there's only one of them that cracks the that exceeds that total. We found out once the Shenmue Kickstarter was announced at E3 of all places, it was also revealed that the crowdfunding money was going to be used as a proof of fan enthusiasm to present to Sony and a few other firms, such as this venture capitalist firm called Shibuya, based out of, I want to say, Sweden, and Deep Silver. So really, it's you didn't actually need this money to complete this game, and this isn't enough money to complete this game anyway. It's just here's this money, give me some more money. And I'd like to quote Dr. Dario Lally here, who wrote about this, who said, I quote, "In spite of its new mission in support of a more creative and equitable world, the platform's acceptance of huge crowdfunding projects deflated by the aid of invisible investors is disseminating a fairly inaccurate idea of the actual costs of video game production. This has particularly negative effects to those small studios and developers that can only rely on crowdfunding initiatives for the financing of their projects. Indie developer Katie Kiranis notices, for example, when you ask for $500,000 and you really need $5 million, it becomes impossible for games with realistic budgets to survive. It's not that people don't understand what a game costs, it's more that Kickstarter is actively distorting people's understanding of a sane budget. The ecosystem is now being poisoned for projects that need to raise its actual workable budget for a game."
Yeah, and for me it might have been Pillars of Eternity, because that's Obsidian Games, a huge studio that went to Kickstarter for their projects, and I mean, this is a studio that made Fallout New Vegas, that's made AAA games before. Why are they going to crowdfunding? And to a degree, having them use crowdfunding as a proof of concept is not a bad idea. They're like we can only make this game if we know there's enthusiasm for it, so we'll use this as a measuring stick for enthusiasm. Like that's not a bad idea, but
Yeah, it almost feels like a pre-order
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, they're treating it like a pre-order or a like a ghost of a pre-order. But indie developers sometimes need Kickstarter or crowdfunding to make their games at all, and this will
Yeah.
be their entire budget outside of their personal savings. So it's a game like I'm just looking down here. A game like FTL, which raised about $200,000, and it was for a while for about for something like 3 weeks, it was the biggest Kickstarter video game of all time until the Double Fine adventure launched less than a month later. Um, I believe that FTL's entire budget was 200K or less. I believe that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so like AAA studios or celebrated creators, like I mentioned Eiyuden Chronicle and Bloodstained earlier in this episode, I'm not sure those people need Kickstarter, and having them use Kickstarter in the same environment as tiny studios like the guy who made FTL or the two guys who made Cosmic Star Heroine, it's a disparity because those are two entirely different game budgeting strategies, and both of them employ crowdfunding. And because those two different uses of crowdfunding put in the same box will distort the community's view of crowdfunding, and it's weird. I mentioned Double Fine Adventure. That was the first video game Kickstarter project to break 1 million, and it ended up landing at around $3 million in 2012, and ended up being a Broken Age Part 1 and Part 2, and that I think kickstarted interest in Kickstarter, with a lot of big Kickstarters happening in the say 2012 to 2016 range, and Kickstarter's record for biggest project kept breaking every few months. It felt like in that range. And some Kickstarter projects were very successful. Like I mentioned, I think FTL is one of the really good examples of a successful indie Kickstarter campaign, because it met stretch goals, delivered a full product, and is popular to this day. FTL is good. It's worth checking out. If you, it's kind
great,
of it's a space sim game with roguelike elements that feels like Oregon Trail in space sometimes. I really like FTL. And
You played Into the Breach?
oh yeah, I have played Into the Breach. That was the same guy's next game with
That's
that. It's
right.
like a time travel sort of small scale strategy RPG roguelike. That thing's really interesting. But like there are indie success stories on Kickstarter, and indie studios continue to use Kickstarter now. But I think that early window of the first 4 years or so after Double Fine Adventure was sort of when it peaked in enthusiasm, because there was a lot of excitement around how it could possibly energize indie developers, and also people hadn't really quite gotten wise to it yet. Like there weren't a ton of high profile failures, and enthusiasm didn't wane until Kickstarter or crowdfunding became a more common reality, and people started to notice the failures as much as the successes. But that's a little bit of my personal perception of it. And I should mention, I gave to a lot of Kickstarter projects in that first couple of years, including Mighty Number 9, which is one I have some regrets about, and a few others that I have much fewer regrets about. But I think the last 2 years, I've only given to a crowdfunding project maybe 3 or 4 times. I think one of my friends was trying to raise money to take her dog to the vet, and I did give to Eiyuden Chronicle, and I gave to, I think, 1 or 2 comics or book related projects. So like I am not nearly the check Kickstarter every week person that I was 5 years ago. So I'm much wiser to how Kickstarter works and how crowdfunding affects the game industry, but I haven't abandoned it. Rob, what was the last Kickstarter or crowdfunding project you remember giving to?
Okay. Well, I I have this adage with Kickstarter that I kind of touched on earlier, that I think it's important not to fall into the nostalgia trap, and things like Shenmue and Mighty Number 9 are high profile examples of that. I kind of fell into it myself with the there was a Tex Murphy follow up really early on in Kickstarter's history, the Tesla effect. And I remember backing that and being like, oh, I like the idea of playing a new Tex Murphy game. I could just play an old Tex Murphy game. I don't actually want to play one made in 2014. But I am ever the hypocrite, and I pledged to Eiyuden Chronicles because I'd really like to see what Murayama does. I think I would be much less enthusiastic about pledging towards it if it was called Suikoden 6. But I know that this is a although he is a high-profile creator, he's really wanted to helm his own project again for a very, very long time and hasn't been able to. So I thought, what the hell? I'll chuck in some money towards this and see where it goes.
Yeah, almost a weird coincidence that 3 high-profile creators under the Konami umbrella all leave the company when they're undermining their own creators' work and are a bit of a sinking ship on the video game side, and then for 2 of them to turn to crowdfunding and one of them to make his own auteur style game. I'm referring to Kojima, this is the Suikoden guy whose name escapes me. I'm sorry, and
Murayama.
Murayama, and Koji Igarashi from Castlevania. And Igarashi's project being Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which eventually did come out, even though it came out 2 years later than originally planned. And I thought Bloodstained was very, very good.
I think it turned out great. Yeah, I didn't back it, but I'm really impressed with it.
Yeah, I did back it and love it because I'm a bit of a Castlevania fanboy. I'm not ashamed to admit. Tina, can you remember a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding backed game that you played and enjoyed recently, or maybe one you covered recently in Crowdfunding Chronicles that you'd like to bring up?
I finished Night in the Woods about a week ago, and I loved it. I just thought it had like the perfect mix of like humor and sad scenes, and it was really relatable at times.
Tina, maybe you're aware of this, maybe you aren't, but I'm pretty sure you're talking to the person who wrote RPG Fan's review of Night in the Woods.
I was, yeah, and I was a backer of that project, and it's probably one of my favorite games of all time. So I mean, that's a big for me in my heart of hearts. That is an outstanding Kickstarter project that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I followed that project very, very closely from the monthly updates. That got delayed by about 2 years as well. I don't think I've ever seen a Kickstarter that's met its initial goal. But they really turned out an astounding little piece of interactive fiction that has affected so many people. I mean, everybody who I know who's played it has really, really positive feelings about it.
I haven't played the little bonus episodes, but I heard they released those before the main game, like as some kind of just a little preview since the main game was late.
Yeah, I haven't played those yet either, but yeah. I'm gonna need to get around to those. I mean, if you want to talk about like talking about disruptions to the gaming industry,
yeah.
Those developers, Scott and Bethany, they've started a worker co-op for their next project, the Glory Society, I believe it's called. So it's
oh, that's interesting.
It's them, and it's a third member, I think a sound designer, and like all 3 of them, have equal positions in the company and will be getting equal shares of profits. And I don't know if they're going to crowdfund their next project or what, but I mean, I'm always happy to hear something like that. Dead Cells had a very similar format, and that was a really successful game. So it's always, enticing to hear about worker-led co-ops.
Dead Cells, another game I haven't played. I have a bit of a fear of roguelikes, or a negative feeling about roguelikes, which has been recently fixed with my obsession with Hades. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I have Dead Cells in my future as well. Although I don't think I own a copy of that one. Talking about projects I personally backed, the most money I ever gave to a Kickstarter was for a game I mentioned earlier, Cosmic Star Heroine, made by the Z-Boyd Games duo. Robert Boyd and Bill Sternberg. That's an indie RPG I think they overpromised at the beginning, saying that it was inspired by their love of Chrono Trigger, Lunar, and Phantasy Star, among others, which is extremely lofty goals. Or although it was that was genuinely their influences for the game. I think Cosmic Star Heroine ended up great, but I gave so much money to it that it made me a little bit hesitant to ever give that much again to a Kickstarter project. I'm a little bit hesitant to say what the exact amount was, but if you want to look it up, it was what I ended up doing was I designed a optional boss for the game that is in the final version of the game. It was a a ghost version of one of my childhood pets, in fact. But
Oh,
yeah,
That's very cute.
yeah, she was a Labrador Retriever whose one of her favorite toys was a garden rake that she would like run around the yard with, and we made her into a ghost dog samurai for Cosmic Star Heroine. And I believe that defeating her is part of the side quest of one character to get some new skills. But so I'm happy with how she turned out. But the game itself is good, but I just gave myself sticker shock for how much I gave to the Kickstarter. So, but it's a good game that I encourage people play if they can. It's available on every console now. But Kickstarter is not all indie successes. One particularly spectacular failure, where I mean, Rob mentioned like Kickstarter projects, people giving to them enthusiastically because of their memory of a game rather than the promise of a game. And Unsung Story might be the worst version of that because
Oh no.
yeah, I mean, none other than the creator of Final Fantasy Tactics had this, projected as a successor, and it ended up being like bought out by a mobile game company called Playdeck, who's of whom I think I have a couple card games on my phone, and
Yeah, they do like digital versions of tabletop games. Don't
yeah,
they?
I have a digital. I think they do the digital version of Ascension, which is what made me think of them.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and Ascension, a very good card game. And the digital version's fine, but like Unsung Story, that project ended up that Matsuno project ended up being so awful that I think they ended up giving back the money to a lot of backers, and it's technically not dead. I think Playdeck still intends to do something with that name, but it's
not with Playdeck anymore.
It's not with Playdeck anymore?
They handed it over to a company called Little Orbit, and apparently it's coming out next month.
No, I did not know that, and I don't believe it right now. But is it still intended to be a mobile platform strategy RPG?
Yeah, I mean there was a stream of it over the summer.
Weird.
I tend to go by the adage: if something looks too good to be true, it probably is. An Unsung Story, I couldn't get over how they were very eager to name drop Yasumi Matsuno, but it was never really clear what his involvement would be and how much involvement he actually had.
And didn't he leave altogether?
He did, yeah. And they met some stretch goals to bring along some other Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics collaborators like artist Akihiko Yoshida and the Base Escape musicians. And by mid 2016, there'd been no mock-ups there'd been only mock-ups, no actual screenshots or gameplay footage. Then Matsuno and everybody else who they brought in had left the team, as well as the core programmers. So it went over to Playdeck. And it's very obvious from the stream that they did over the summer that I don't know about Matsuno, but Base Escape and Akihiko Yoshida are definitely not involved because their work is not in the demo that they were showing.
I did not give to that project because I was just too suspicious. And
suspicious.
Yeah, although that was in the window of when I was giving to a lot of Kickstarter projects. But I remember being on Final Fantasy or RPG forums at the time. There was so much hype around that among very specific circles that it was a little amazing to watch it crash and burn the way it did. I thought that it was sort of still floating around as someone's intellectual property, but was completely unaware of its recent stream or of its of its upcoming release. That's wild.
But I'm not suggesting it's a scam. I think there's very, very few scams, but hundreds of mismanaged projects.
Yeah. I mean, calling it a scam, I think, is a little unfair, but mismanaged project, 100% agree.
There's so many campaigns that get put up way too early in development.
Or by people who've never been project managers before, And I mean, having the money is a core requirement to make your project, but you also need to have experience in managing a project of that scale and meeting your backer expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean these don't get a lot of money, but I think there were definitely some projects that were first-time developers with big ideas who tried to get funding together just with something like concept art, but were
Mm.
completely unready for the realities of game development. There's one project I've been following for, oh, I don't know, probably 5 years. I'd have to check. But Heartforth Alicia with a very talented
Oh
background
my God,
artist.
I forgot that's still not out.
Yeah, it's still not out because it's a very talented artist who had a lot of like work in progress art for the game. Put out the Kickstarter, I want to say 6 years ago, but I could be off by
Mm.
that. Um, and
I wanted to back that one, but I wasn't financially secure.
I
Now
did
I'm kind of
back it.
glad that I waited.
I did back it because it was in that window when I was giving a lot. Yeah, it was 2014. I was right, but that game is still not out and I think it's because it's a talented artist who had never really made a game before, using Kickstarter to try to have that be the funding and the start that he needed to actually make the game. But now it's 2020 and the game is still not out. We
I
he
had
get
I had a similar experience with Radio the Universe, who's like a very talented pixel artist doing their first game, and that was
mm,
supposed to be out in 2014. But I mean, he's making regular updates and showing footage, so it's like, yeah, I mean, Kickstarter's not a pre-order. If you
yeah.
lose your money, you lose your money. But like, he's obviously working away on it. So I mean, like, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm cool with
Alonzo
that.
Martin intends to release Heartforth Alicia at some point, but I believe the original promise of a release date was 2016, and we get an update from him every several months. But I'm I get increasingly skeptical. But when I get a digital copy of that game, I will definitely fire it up and see how it turned out. But that's a bit of an if.
I really appreciate when they give updates like monthly, even if the project
Yeah.
takes forever. I know some of the good ones have just disappeared entirely, and I'm thinking of Project Phoenix.
Mm,
Yeah,
right.
we need to talk about Project Phoenix.
Yeah.
Oh man, I remember seeing that in lists. I don't think I gave to that. I think it was maybe I was starting to wean myself off of giving a lot of money to Kickstarter when that started up. So tell us a little bit about Project Phoenix.
Okay, well, it was another strategy RPG, and I think based on like inspired by Final Fantasy Tactics and a lot of those classics.
It was kind of like another one of those big, too good to be true
Yeah, like
projects.
very, very similar to Unsung Story. I think it was around the same time too.
Yeah, I got them both mixed up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Mid 2010s, yeah. I think it's maybe I was just much more focused on Unsung Story than Project Phoenix, but I sort of maybe thought Project Phoenix was an alternative title for Unsung Story or something because it's a very similar pitch with a similar lack of actual material, like art or images or demos.
Yeah, there's a lot of great concept art on the page. And like
And
concept.
nothing else. So like they claim to have like Nobuo Uematsu involved. I think the project leader is this guy Hiroaki Yura, who is he's a violinist who plays on lots of game and anime soundtracks. And like this was like his first big studio, and like. I'm not saying that a violinist can't direct a game studio, but it seemed like a very an in over their heads project, especially with the amount of capital that it attracted from backers. And that one, I want to say that just fell off almost
Yeah,
like
there hasn't
a
been any
year
updates
after.
in March last year.
Wow, so right around a year and a half or longer.
Yeah, I remember at one point it's like they got a whole new programming team.
That's a bad sign. I was
Yeah.
really worried about Bloodstained for a while because in back-to-back updates, they brought in new development teams for assets and
They brought in
testing.
Concept at one
Yeah,
point,
it was
like
Concept,
right on
which
the heels of people complaining about Mighty Number Nine.
yeah, it was Concept and oh shoot, Dave Lang's studio in Chicago.
Oh, Iron Galaxy.
Yeah,
Is
Iron
that it?
Galaxy. Yeah, like they brought in both of those to do sort of like finishing touches work on Bloodstained, and those announcements came a month or two apart. So that made me wonder, oh no, is this thing being held up by gumdrops and toothpicks? They need to bring in extra studios just to put something out. But the final product ended up being quite excellent. So I was
Yeah.
my fears were a little unfounded, or at least ended up being unfounded when that happened. But like that's just the kind of alarming development you don't love to hear when a game you're interested is under development. You know, if I had to pick a best video game project to come out of Kickstarter, in terms of just sort of general acclaim, it might be the Divinity games. Because Divinity Original Sin 1 and Original Sin 2 were both Kickstarter games. I think Divinity Original Sin 1 was just trying to measure fan enthusiasm following Divine Divinity, and then Original Sin 2 was more of a proof of concept that got a lot that was just to try to attract investors. But I mean, those two games have really loyal followings, including among RPG fan staff. I think Divinity Original Sin 2 is like one of Steve Meyerink's favorite games of all time.
The very idea of like the top down Black Isle style RPG, but co-op is a really enticing one. Wasteland 3, which came out a couple of months ago, does the same sort of thing where like you and a buddy play like back-to-back partners, and it's an incredibly satisfying shot in the arm to an old formula.
Yeah, we mentioned Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 earlier, and also Torment Tides of Numenera are all games from Obsidian and Chris Avellone and that crowd, making games like those isometric Black Isle or even Eternity Engine RPGs like from 20 years ago. And again, I think just I'm not sure those projects needed Kickstarter because those are huge names, but like they sort of reaffirmed the popularity of that kind of game when maybe AAA developers were thought it was passé, which is
That's what I'm thinking.
that's an interesting positive consequence of Kickstarter or crowdfunding. That some of these old styles have so much positive nostalgia that a successful game project can arise from that design philosophy. It's
in Obsidian's defense, I mean, although they've made big games, they've only been able to make big games when they've had big money behind them from a publisher.
That's true. It was Bethesda money that helped make Fallout New Vegas.
Oh, definitely. I can't imagine them like pitching Pillars to somebody like Microsoft or Bethesda and getting it greenlit. So I understand why they would go to Kickstarter for a project like that. And then, maybe they saw the writing on the wall that Kickstarter, maybe we should leave this to like the smaller indies. And then they moved to Fig for Pillars of Eternity 2, which like it seems like it's it seems like there's more. I mean, the whole point of Fig is to you can either back as an individual a la Kickstarter, or you can like back as a organization to get a share of the profits.
I think Double Fine turned to Fig for Psychonauts 2 or different.
They created Fig.
Yeah, right. But I remember I remember thinking it was crazy at the time that one of the groups that blew up Kickstarter ended up moving on to their own platform. Which is, I don't know.
It raises some questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Kickstarter does get a cut of all of their successful investment projects. So, which makes the Kickstarter numbers that we've been citing over and over in this episode.
They take 5%.
5%. Okay, so it's not.
But still, you need to budget that in when you're crowdfunding.
Yeah, exactly. And so not quite as bad as I thought, but still, it's again this being mostly new to the 2010s. It's so fascinating that it's a regular part of our how we consume games now. Like without crowdfunding, I don't think early access projects would exist. And that has been a big part of, especially PC indie games, the past 2 or 3 years. With games like Nuclear Throne had a really good early access, but now early access is a lot of it is just complete unplayable messes that are being sold for 99 cents on Steam just to get people to follow their projects. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. I don't tend to dip too far into early access. Like if I'm really interested in a project, and it's something like if it's something like a roguelike that's just going to grow and you can play over and over again, I'll have a peek then. Like I bought Crypt of the Necrodancer when that was in early access. One of my favorite games in early access at the moment is World of Horror, the Junji Ito inspired horror card-based roguelike.
Okay, that's interesting, and I enjoy Junji Ito, but I don't think I want to play a Junji Ito game, just because I'm worried about what it would do to me.
Oh, there's some stuff with eyeballs you don't want to know.
No, I have some idea, but I'm not going to confirm that hypothesis.
But yeah, like I'm cool with dipping into an early access project that's like smaller and is based on adding replayable content, whereas something like I think Torment Tides of Numenera launched in early access, and it's like, okay, this is a giant game with like reams and reams and reams of text. I think I just would rather wait until this is out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
I understand if the most viable way for them to make it come out is through early access. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
One other thing that I've heard commentary about this in various theaters over the past decade or so, but there's been a bit of a lament over the disappearance of the mid-budget game. And then this is me listening to mainstream video game podcasts and the like, where there was a concern that because video game budgets have ballooned over the past 15 years, that a game needs to be huge and successful to even justify it being made, which means that publishers are increasingly less risky or less willing to take risks when they commit to making a game. Whereas in the, say, mid-2000s or earlier, like you'll get more experimental, more risky games with medium or large budgets because those medium and large budgets just weren't hundreds of millions of dollars. So as part of that observation, people were lamenting a game that like the $40 interesting weird RPG wasn't getting made for a while, because again, like the commentary of Square Enix saying that Tomb Raider has to sell 10 million copies for them to make another one. Do you remember that from 8 years ago or however long? Like a commentary like that made some people concerned, and crowdfunding projects, especially these mid-budget ones that maybe get more investment later, or ones that have very successful campaigns with different investment later, might be filling that gap. A game that's a little too weird or experimental to get immediate approval or investment from a large studio might get made from a successful crowdfunding campaign and then later investment. Do you think there's some truth to that, or were people just are people just being weird that game prices game budgets were getting alarmingly high?
Oh, I suddenly started thinking about Tokyo RPG Factory.
Oh boy.
I don't know if they shut down or because I haven't heard of any new projects coming out from them, and I heard their last one wasn't too successful.
They put out their first action RPG last year, Oninaki, which I think was one of their more interesting games. I don't know how successful it was, though.
Yeah, because I really liked their first game, and I was just hoping for more along those lines, right?
Yeah, I remember. I remember seeing promotional material of I Am Setsuna and Oninaki, and I definitely saw both of them at E3 in those years. But I mean, Tokyo RPG Factory is a subsidiary of Square Enix, right?
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, so like that mid-budget thing is still coming from a large publisher taking a significant risk, and I don't know how well Oninaki did, but I think that there's some concern about that studio's future.
Yeah, it's not looking good. It looks like they operated at a net loss of 154 million yen this year.
Uh-oh.
So I guess Oninaki didn't do good.
And I mean, to a degree, you could argue that like Square Enix is trying to make games to fit different budgetary things, because like what Tokyo RPG Factory makes is far different from a Final Fantasy VII remake or an Avengers game, or the recent PS4 Xbox One Avengers, which were both Square studios working under Square Enix, but huge budget. So I think like Square Enix has been trying to make different kinds of games. From and in between those, you have your Bravely Default and Octopath Travelers, which are
I was going to say, look at Octopath.
That was
the success.
Yeah, those aren't like AAA budget games, but they're still big releases that did very well, and I'm still really hopeful about Bravely Default 2 coming out next year. So I think that Square Enix is sort of trying multiple strategies for different game budgets and game projects, and maybe Tokyo RPG Factory was not a very successful one, and Square Enix Collective wasn't a very successful one. But some do work, and Square Enix is still making some good video games. Like I haven't heard very many good things about their recent Avengers game from Eidos or Crystal Dynamics, but Final Fantasy XIV is still great. A lot of people liked the FF7 remake.
I think the fear of the disappearance of the mid game, the mid budget game. I think that was a very real thing in the past. I think maybe we're kind of moving past it now, because I remember that was something that I really lamented during the 360 and PS3 era in particular, and why I primarily moved to handheld gaming during that period, because that kind of like felt like a continuation of these smaller budget. But loaded with charm games that I really liked about the PS1 and PS2 era, whereas the 360 and PS3 era felt like there was very little experimentation going on, and lots of studios were playing it safe. And I'm seeing, like, I don't know, personally, I've seen a lot more experimentation this generation than there has been than there had been the generation prior. So, with so many tools available to creators, like the bar to game development, like while game development is still very expensive, the bar to entry has never been lower, for better or worse. Personally, I think that's a positive. Like we're seeing, for example, Adult Swim are putting out a wide variety of interesting games, and that's not somebody who you would usually think of as a game publisher, but they're putting out some cool stuff like the one that really comes to mind is Death's Gambit, the Souls-inspired Metroidvania game.
Yeah, that game had some pretty amazing. I don't know if sprite's the right word, but like the animation of the main character's attacks are sort of brilliant and bloody and brutal.
Yeah, really, really nice voice acting and writing as well. And then Devolver are still putting out pretty cool projects that get a lot of press. So I mean, there's never been more games out there at the moment. So I think that, like, I largely have a more positive outlook than I would have in previous years. But I mean, inflation and one-upmanship is still a thing. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head where the budget bloat and the concerns about lack of risk taking really did happen sort of in the middle of the PSV 60 generation, and things have gotten better recently. And I think that different fundraising strategies like crowdfunding are part of it. Also, the wide acceptance of base programming engines like Unity or Unreal has been a factor. A lot of Square Enix games are made in the Unreal Engine, and that probably saves a lot of development costs. And
probably saves them from operating at a loss as well. In the 360 era with Final Fantasy 13 and insisting on developing all their own proprietary engines instead of working on middleware. And we know the troubled history that 13 had.
Yeah, adapting middleware helps some of these large budgets and maybe allows them to make more interesting games at large budgets. It's like none of us are professional game developers, and talking about game development and game budgets is something that fans of video games love to do, especially in sub-professional projects like amateur podcasts. But it's so fascinating to me. It's so fascinating to me that like a zillion things have to go right for a game to be functional, and paying for them you even have to get into weird disruptive strategies like crowdfunding to even make that happen sometimes. But I'm not completely over it, because I mean they gave me Bloodstained last year and might give me a really good Eiyuden Chronicle 2 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, I think also Kickstarter, it ties in nicely with digital distribution, which I think that's kind of a deterrent against piracy, really. With so many games at your fingertips digitally, you press a button and buy something and then download it. I think that now that everything is just ubiquitously available, there's not scarcity, especially of RPGs and JRPGs, which,
Yeah.
like, some of the most beloved or sought after games of the 32-bit and PS2 and GameCube era. They're just not available. And sometimes let's say maybe somebody will resort to some gray area seeking down of a game that would otherwise be over $1,000 for a used physical copy. But whereas where everything's available digitally, and Kickstarter really encourages this, like, we're going to make a digital product and it will be in your hands once it's ready. I think it's probably had a positive effect on revenue for creators. I mean, Shenmue 3, again, as much as I feel like it didn't need to be on Kickstarter, I think about how Shenmue 1 and 2 were so big, and then, like, were completely operated at a loss because of hackers creating the Pandora boot disk for the Dreamcast in early 2000, which just allowed bootlegs of anything to be burned and played. Whereas Shenmue 3, it's like, okay, here, buy your copy and download it straight away.
Yeah, one of the dirty secrets about piracy is that more effective than any anti-piracy software or anti-piracy tools is just making things really easy to buy, because people love shopping and buying things.
Yeah.
The age of buying way too much on GOG sales or Steam sales is still ongoing.
Every time still.
Yeah. Oh man. Like I see the notification. I always keep my Steam wish list around the 25 to 30 range, just to follow games I'm interested in. I'll get the notification 21 games on your wish list are on sale, and then I post the GIF of Jordan Peele sweating. But okay, if we're talking about GIFs of Jordan Peele and Steam sales, we might be at the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Tina and Rob, for joining me on this journey through crowdfunding and Kickstarter and bloated projects and video game budgets and all the places we rambled to. We managed to avoid talking about Star Citizen, which is probably for the best, because the very idea of Star Citizen makes me feel a little gross.
It hurts my head.
Yeah, it's a game that's made over $275 million from crowdfunding campaigns that is still technically not officially released. It is still in some alpha or beta, and people have spent millions of dollars on it, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. But something I do want to talk about is the rest of 2020 in Retro Encounter. Next week we're doing our second part on Final Fantasy X-2. We were originally going to have this episode go after 10-2, but we ended up flipping them because, frankly, all three people on that panel, including me, are struggling to finish Final Fantasy X-2. But that is coming next week. And in December, we have 5 episodes planned. One of them is to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Tales of series. We're going to do a fantasy draft of characters and ideas and summons and all kinds of stuff from the Tales series to replace the hole in my heart that is the absence of fantasy football, which I gave up in 2018 for reasons I don't want to go into. Fantasy football is the worst. And also 3 episodes on the first 3 Supergiant games, Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre. Now, I confess, Rob, you hosted a very fine podcast a few years ago, and you had your own month of Supergiant games when you were recording that podcast.
We did, yeah. We did those 3 as well. Back when I was doing Misanthroplay with Alva. I'd never played any of them before, and I played them all over the course of a month, and I had a great time.
Yeah, I listened to those episodes. They were great. I played Bastion many years ago. I played Transistor for the first time earlier this year, in fact. I got it on a Switch sale for $3 or something, and played that for the first time. And I still haven't played Pyre, so as soon as I'm done with Final Fantasy X-2, Pyre is next on the list, and I will host all 3 of those episodes and discuss all 3 of the first 3 Supergiant games in December, and with the 5th episode in December, of course, being our annual year-end episode. So, but listeners, if you want to listen to past Retro Encounter, present Retro Encounter, or future Retro Encounter, you know where to find us. It is retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find our podcast on any of your podcast sharing apps, iTunes, Google Play, however you, whatever listening venue you use. We are on basically all of them. We also have 3 other fine podcasts on RPG Fan: Random Encounter about randomness, Rhythm Encounter about RPG Fan music alive for the first time since 2017, and Phoenix Edge, a weekly podcast focused mostly on current events. RPG Fan also has message boards, a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter page, a Discord server, a Twitch streaming every day. There are many, many ways to consume RPG Fan content, and they're all located at places called RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com. So yeah, but thank you again, Robert and Tina. It was a delight to talk to both of you, especially since it has been a long time since talking to either of you. And please do not let this be your final encounter on Retro Encounter.
I'm very touched that you had me back. It was really nice to catch up and say hey to everybody.
Yeah, I expect to be back soon for the Transistor episode.
Ooh, nice! You're gonna play. Is this your first time playing Transistor?
Yep.
Awesome.
And I think I got it for $3.
Yeah, I mean, the Transistor came out in 2014, so it's been floating out there on all of those digital distribution services that we were talking about a few minutes ago. It's very easy to get Bastion or Transistor on your machine. Pyre isn't on the Switch, but is definitely on PS4 and PC, which is it's not that hard to get a hold of that one. Hades, their 4th game, came out very recently, and I adore it. And I may try to finagle a way to talk about Hades on those episodes.
I just bought it and I haven't fired it up yet. I'm so excited to do so.
Oh, it's so good. It scratches multiple itches for me, especially the hole in my heart from when I deleted Diablo 3 off my computer. But thank you, listeners. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tina. Please read Tina's crowdfunding Chronicles articles. But Rob and Tina, how can listeners find you directly, starting with you, Rob?
I'm on Twitter @Nervous, NURVUSS. I'm pretty lazy now that I don't write for RPG Fan anymore. But Hardcore Gaming have just put out the unofficial guide to Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, which you can buy at any fine book retailer. If you want to hear more or read more Persona 1 Apologia from yours truly, it's one to pick up. I also wrote up Majin Tensei and Last Bible. So it's a big definitive guide of everything that's out to date. So if you're a fan of SMT and Persona, give it a peek.
Tina, how can listeners reach you directly?
Kittensoft39 on Twitter. I post screenshots of whatever I'm playing, mixed in with all sorts of cute animal pictures.
And you're also an artist who posts your own fan art or similar art on Twitter and Instagram as well, right?
Yeah, I just reactivated my old Twitter art page, but you can also find that at kittensoft_art.
Oh, okay. I definitely follow your main account on Twitter. I'll have to follow that second one as well in case I haven't. I'm not sure.
I haven't used it for about a year, and now I'm kind of back there just to split off the gaming stuff and the art.
I'm very active on Twitter, but I'm not always good about following people because it's very easy to not notice things in the morass that is Twitter. But speaking of the morass that is Twitter, listeners, the best way to reach me is Twitter. I'm at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times, and I also have an account where I host my other podcast project, Bravely Distance, which will have episodes coming soon in November, believe it or not. I had a round of being extremely busy at work in the summer and fall because one person in my section retired, and then due to the pandemic, we only had one person in the office at a time instead of 3. So work has just been exhausting for months for me, and that's why I fell off my project.
Season.
Yeah, exactly. That's why my
pandemic season.
Yeah, exactly. That's why my podcast project fell off a little bit. But I'm going to re-energize myself and get back on that. And my third, totally unnecessary third Twitter account is where you can find that. But listeners, from Rob, Tina, RPG Fan, and I, we don't have any crowdfunding for Retro Encounter. But anyway, thank you. Good night and good luck.